Hey, thanks for checking out our video on the Rising to the Future campaign. My name is Aaron. I'm a pastor here at Sunlight Community Church. And to talk to you about it today, we've got two people in charge and in the lead here. We've got Pastor Scott Vanderplug, Senior Pastor of Sunlight Community Church and Multiply 222 Network, and the head of schools, Sarah Wilson Hyde. Thanks for being here.
Sure, thank you.
We're going to talk about the Rising Towards the Future campaign, but to lead up to it, we have to talk about the history of the school and the church together, how it all came to be, what makes the school distinct, so our core distinctives, and why this is such a strategic moment for everyone, particularly right now. So,
Okay.
yeah, maybe Pastor Scott, I mean, you started this thing. Why don't you run us through what the history of the school is?
Yeah, great. I mean, it has a really interesting beginning because my wife Andrea and I moved here in 2004 in the summertime. And it was interesting because we're both from the Pacific Northwest. I'm from Montana and Washington State. Andrea's from Idaho. And I can remember that when I interviewed to become the pastor of the church, one of the questions I had is, what's the deal with hurricanes? And the answer that I was told at the time, I remember still, was that we don't have to worry about that because there's a weather phenomenon called a vortex that steers hurricanes to the north toward the Carolinas or south toward the Keys. And I was told it was virtually impossible for hurricanes to hit here in Port St. Lucie. And I thought, oh, perfect. Anyway, we moved here in July. And if there are people who are listening to this video that were around, there were two hurricanes, Hurricane Francis and Hurricane Jean,
Big ones.
that had a direct hit in Port St. Lucie. And for those who are around at that time, it was a really difficult time. It really, if you were in Port St. Lucie, it looked like a bomb had gone off. And Andrew and I had just moved here. Our oldest child was just a baby. We actually wound up homeless, kind of moving from place to place. There was no electricity. It was just a really tough time. But something important happened, which is there was a local preschool and their building had been destroyed. A little tornado had spun off one of the hurricanes and destroyed their building. And the owner came over to meet me in my office at the church, wondering if they could rent our facility while they rebuilt. And I remember because, it was just a privately owned preschool. He's like, I'm going to lose my business. The kids aren't going to have any place to go. The parents depend on us because they have jobs. I need to find something. And so anyway, we let them rent from our building. And yeah, they moved in and stayed through the remainder of 2004 and into the spring of 2005. I think it was March or April when they finally moved out. And while they were here, there was a group of us that started looking at the situation and saying, if they can run a preschool out of our building, why can't we? And the difference would be that our preschool could be a Christian mission. And we could try to reach people for Christ as well. And we thought, oh, we could do this. So, like I said, they moved out like March, April timeframe of 2005. And then we started making preparations. And it was actually in January of 2006 that we opened our preschool for the first time, Sunlight Christian Academy. There was just 8 students. We had 2 classrooms and 8 students. So it really wasn't, it was a very humble beginning. We couldn't have survived like that. But over the course of time, it started growing. And then when we got to May and June, we had our first summer break. And then we started back up again in August in the fall. And we picked up where we left off. And maybe by the end of 2007, we'd gone from 8 students to like 20-some students, and then 20-some students to 40-some students. And at the conclusion of that school year in 2007, we were thinking to ourselves, you know what? We might have a formula here. We should think about adding on. And so actually we did our first building campaign and started construction in 2008 to add on to the original Octagon building that we have and built the wing of our preschool. And okay, I love this slide because a couple of things. One, I really like the picture of everybody on the bulldozer, and then I also just really, really, really love the picture of you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
And I remember that one of the things we did, I can just remember working around the clock to get our accreditation. And that was a really big deal that we became accredited through Christian Schools of Florida. And anyway, it was fascinating because I don't remember, let's say the first day of school was like August 10 or something like that. I don't really remember what the date was. But I remember that we got our certificate of occupancy for the building like right before the parent orientation.
Yeah.
And then we were up like through the night pulling all-nighters to get ready for kids to come to school. And I can just remember the first day of school when we came and we're like, oh, it's working. Like all of a sudden it was quiet and the teachers were teaching. And I can remember that we thought maybe one day we'll have as many as 100 preschoolers when we were building this building. And it wasn't long and we were almost double that at 180 preschoolers.
Sarah, when you look at that picture, what do you feel?
I just feel so much pride and joy, and I feel like it was just yesterday, but actually it wasn't. It was a long time ago. We all worked really hard, collaboratively, church and school together to make this ministry come alive, and what a blessing it's been for me and for everybody who's been involved, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those teachers there are still here today.
That's right.
Like half that staff right there.
Couldn't have done it without them.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, what came next?
So, okay. Our preschool really started growing, and we got to the point where, and this was what was really great. We started out really as a Christian mission, thinking we can reach people for Christ, and that was working. People started receiving faith in Jesus. They started attending our church and becoming members. And, in 2006, when we started this preschool, our church was quite small. But it started growing, and before you knew it, we had to go to 2 services, and before you knew it, we had to go to 3 services. And the school was just a big catalyst for a lot of ministry that started happening. We started children's ministry, youth ministry. A lot of what was happening in our church, the small groups, everything we were doing was just catalyzed out of the people we were reaching through the school. And anyway, we had some plans to start expanding our facilities again. And it was actually fits and starts, if I remember how it all went, because I'm sure by 2009, 2010, we were already starting to think about it. And then, it just seemed like we weren't able to do it. And then we regathered ourselves. Anyway, in 2014, we started building again, and we built on to what is our new sanctuary and the offices for the church, also the gymnasium and the youth area that we put in. And anyway, when I see this picture, this slide shows some of the grand opening and some of what was there. You can even see that in the construction, the gym was not there yet because we started doing it in stages. But as we open up the new church building, that allowed us to start using the old church building for new classroom space. And as a result, we were able to get, for the very first time, a kindergarten started. Mm-hmm. And we had actually been thinking about trying to expand from preschool to kindergarten for a while, but it was all in the same time frame as we opened up the new sanctuary and office area that we were finally able to do that for the first time with just one class of kindergartners. And then, of course, the following year, we had another class of kindergartners. And so, anyway, also in that same time frame, and I don't know if you have any remembrances of that time, but also in that same time frame, there was a church that had actually been Sunlight's mother church, Lake Worth Christian Reformed Church, that had really just been declining. And it was actually in that same time frame, 2015, that we, Sunlight, became multi-campus for the first time. And we opened up Sunlight Community Church in Lake Worth. And because of our really positive experience in this church-school combo, one of the things we knew that we wanted to do right away is open a preschool in Lake Worth. And so that's one of the first things we did there. So Sunlight Christian Academy also became multi-campus for the first time around that same time frame.
Yeah, I think that's where our passion to multiply was kind of really born. I remember being down there and opening the school and walking in and feeling like, wow, this feels just like sunlight up in Port St. Lucie, but it's here in Lake Worth, and the parents and the children are experiencing the wonderful opportunities that we can give, our children. So it was really exciting.
Yeah. Now we have 4 campuses, but I'm sure we'll get to that here.
Yeah. So if we just kind of keep going along with the history, what wound up happening is in 2016, we actually went into our old church building, and because it's exoskeleton, which means the structure of it's all around the outside, we were able to completely gut out the interior, and we rebuilt everything in the interior so that we could expand the school some more. And that allowed us to move from kindergarten to first grade, from first grade to second. The first 2 years, when we had kindergarten, then when we had first grade, the preschool was still running, but we just had one class of each. But it's actually the third year when we had kindergarten, first and second, that year we opened 2 kindergarten classrooms. And from then on, we always had 2 sections of every grade until just a little bit later in our history. We'll talk about how we got to 3 sections of each grade. 2017, actually, there was kind of 2 construction projects going at once. We remodeled the old church building for the school, and then we also were working on what is our fellowship hall and gymnasium, which ended up being a very important addition for our school because it just gets used all the time in the elementary school for lunch and for PE and for all kinds of activities. And of course, we use it for the church for everything as well. I mean, just a really used space. But now, especially, as we're into the middle school years, we have middle school sports and even high school sports now. And so we really
crazy.
wouldn't have been able to proceed without having the gym. And so that ended up being, volleyball, basketball, it ended up being really big.
I'll never forget, Aaron, when you had the idea to add a second story onto the gymnasium. Thank God you did, right?
Yeah.
Because it allowed us to grow.
That was a big one.
Yeah, it was.
That was a big one. Anyway, as the elementary school started growing, we realized, we're going to be out of space. As we started getting a 3rd grade and a 4th grade, we started realizing, we've got to find a way to expand. And actually at that time, this is probably in 2021, 2020, when we were first starting, our first thought was, is there a new campus that we could acquire, lease, buy? And we did find some places, but we just couldn't make it work out. And so we actually circled back around and decided, you know what? Probably our best option right now is to just build here. And so actually, my time frame's a little off because it was 2020. When was it that we put the shovel in the ground?
2020.
It's 2020.
It was.
And then
right,
everything.
because that year, COVID hit,
happened, yeah.
And what was going to be a 7th-month construction project turned into a 2-year
2 years.
construction project. Okay, here's the slide for our grand opening in January of 2022. We were finally able to open up our brand new elementary school building, which allowed us really to continue all the way through 8th grade. And we had the idea that we could have 2 classes of every grade all the way up to 8th grade.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to me because I thought, once we opened the building, it'd just take some amount of time for us to maybe fill up. But it was amazing because we opened the building and we were full like simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And the state of Florida had started offering some scholarships, but it was right about that time as well, in the spring of 2022, that Florida passed its new law on Florida scholarships, the Step Up for Student program, where every student in the state of Florida is now eligible for a scholarship for school tuition. And there's a number of different programs, but I just realized at that time, wow, not only are we full, but no matter what we do in Christian education, we'll never outsupply the demand. There's way more people who want to have a Christian education now in the state of Florida than there are Christian schools to offer it. And that's why we started thinking so aggressively about, okay, is there another campus where we could move our middle school to, and that could allow us to expand the elementary school and just reach more people with the gospel and with the message of Christianity. And so right away we started looking, and it was actually in January of 2024 that we had our grand opening. What was in Port St. Lucie at the former PGA Learning Center. It was almost like, yeah, the Professional Golfers Association built a school that we could kind of move into. There were some renovations we did, but actually everything was there and it was perfect for us. And so we were able to move our middle school students there. And that allowed us also the following year to start expanding how many classes we had or sections we had in each grade. So we started expanding to 3 sections or 60 students in each grade. And now we have that K through 5th already.
It seems like the recurring, I don't know, trend or wave that God has been sending us is that whenever we've expanded, it was full, like near immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
with long waiting lists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was a lot to handle as on your end, right, Sarah?
It was, but I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, and I think 2024 provided unique opportunities and unique challenges for us. Unique opportunities because there was also a church in Winter Garden that had been one of our sister churches. And all of a sudden, that property was put into our care. And there was actually no church left, just a building. Really a beautiful place. And so we decided, okay, we have the opportunity to plant a church there. And this time, instead of starting with the church, we actually started with the school. And so it just so happened that right about the time we were doing our ribbon cutting for the new PGA campus, we were also doing a ribbon cutting on Sunlight Christian Academy and Sunlight Community Church in Winter Garden, which is just straight west from the city of Orlando, kind of as a suburb of Orlando. And maybe, Sarah, you can say a little bit about that school as well.
Well, there are no accidents. I mean, this building actually used to be a preschool.
Yeah.
So previously it was set up to be a preschool. It was all ready to go for us. The children and the families that came were just overjoyed to have the opportunity, and it's grown by leaps and bounds already. So what a blessing.
Yeah. Can I tell a story?
Please.
Because this whole history has got me thinking. I learned about this particular story just recently. So the people who, excuse me, the people who selected you to be the pastor here, apparently were people who made a decision that, hey, we need to. There were 2 other people, 3 in total, and the other 2 pastors had much more experience and experience as a pastor than Scott at the time. So Scott was like, how old, 27, 28?
Yeah.
And they decided to pick Pastor Scott because they wanted a pastor that would build for the future, younger families. They didn't know what, but they needed someone to drive that mission. And it was apparently the same people who really took Scott's idea and said, hey, why can't we do this ourselves? And they said yes. And it's unlikely because, church folk don't want to change things, especially like an old snowbird church.
Yeah.
It can be very insular. It can be very like anti-growth or adverse to it. But there are these particular people who decided, hey, we have a distinct mission here and an opportunity and an idea. And so walking out in faith, let's do that. And so they decided to make decisions based on the future, invest in the future, give towards the future, build towards the future. And I just think that that's such a great legacy that we're building on, that these guys who could have easily been insular.
There was a tremendous vision.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I'll remember. I had been on the mission field. I wanted to be a missionary. And what drew me to this place, I was like, wow, this is a mission field. And the people who are part of this church, they had a vision for reaching this community. And I do agree. There's just a tremendous legacy that I kind of walked into and was a part of right from the beginning. And my way of looking at it is that God brought the right people and he had a plan. And he used the people at the time to start accomplishing that plan.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's been that way the whole way. There's been people who have seen a vision for what the future could be. and they invested in it, and it's
I-
been amazing.